Good morning, everybody. Just getting everything set up here. See, today is the 21st. So max pain is at 749. Now the call wall and put wall has not been updated, so these are just arbitrarily tossed up there. Yeah, sorry, I always start my stream off kind of quiet. But good morning. Glad you all are here. Sorry I didn't stream yesterday. I was not feeling very good. How's everybody's morning going so far? So currently with the levels we do have, that's where our call and put wall is, but it will adjust on open. Alright, let's mark some levels out. Actually, I want to make a new template here. For resistances. $747.01. Then the 746.66. That's a ominous number. 74666. And let's make a template for supports. And that is at 740.96. Also a couple others in here, which I'll mark this one. I won't mark these ones right here. 742.61. And we'll also go ahead and mark out the 748.73 right here. Okay, bunch of lines, but we should be off to a solid start. Alrighty, so one thing I do want to look at. So my gold is doing good, which makes me happy. ACN dumping a little bit. but that's okay. See IBM 212. Semis are up a boatload. Right about that level then. Alright, so here's kind of the thesis that I have so far, is that the market is up pretty immensely right now. Now that doesn't mean we can't continue rallying. We've definitely seen days where semiconductors have moved like 8 or 9% within the session. We did have a low yesterday of 40.98 or 4.98, excuse me, 54. And currently the pre-market is up to 547. So that is up a whole $49, which that kind of fits within the move on semis. Remember, we always talk about usually semis have about a $30 range. Now, yes, this is all kind of to the upside so far, but within that $30 range, we absolutely can start pulling down again, especially if we don't reach this range right in here. So we'll be watching for that, if they try to claim that or not. Five-minute time frame looks okay so far. We have a bit of bit of a cup and handle forming, like a tog. Now I want to look over QQQ because there will probably be a lot of similarities. What's this based off of? I think that was just arbitrarily placed there. I'm going to mark this level, even though we have pushed above that slightly, but we do have this cup and handle forming, which can definitely take us up higher. Now these levels on QQQ and semis I'm not worried about marking to the penny. Fortunately, we have to mark both those ranges. Looks like. So we have 3 minutes and 30 seconds until the market opens. Now QQQ, which is tech, has still been trading very, very well within the selling channel. I don't know why that shifted a little bit. I wonder if there was a dividend. And did we close a large inverse cup here? We did, almost to the penny. Yeah, just 11 cents off. So we do have a very large inverse cup formed here. Which means that we can be starting to form that inverse handle. For SPY, I do want to mark this out. Hold on. Let's do a ray. So either today we are going to, hold on, let's do the standard template. We're going to complete this head and shoulders. And start pushing down again. And from pushing down, very likely push towards that 740.96. Or we're going to aim to complete this cup to the upside, which will take us to the 748.73. Now the bullish structure doesn't look so great here. We did not complete this cup at the 747.01. Market has opened, so let's check our volatility. That's not updated yet, it will in just a few minutes. The HIG was at 79.78 in the pre-market, has pulled down to the 79.72, currently at 79.73. So we'll see if we see an increase in buying there. Now the dollar, DXY, has been pushing upward, which is not exactly bullish for the market. It shows that there's less dollars in the system. Less dollars in the system usually leads to, you know, less buying of equities. Now let's go to our 5-minute time frame here. So we did complete this cup, it looks like. Yeah, we did. It hit that level exactly. So potentially we could be forming a handle here. And I'll go ahead and pull the Bollingers up. Really great short position. Just did not catch that on time. You would have basically had short almost immediately. But from that, expect the pull downward, and we'll see if that returns as, upward momentum to create that handle for that cup. Volatility has pulled down a little bit. Did close at the 102 yesterday. It's currently at the 147. It did open at the 100.07. Okay. So this is starting to pull up a little bit. HIG pulling down slightly. But we'll kind of expect that to happen when we're forming a potential handle on this cup here. So I am going to go ahead and sell my gold position because that's what I do every week. Try to buy the low of the week and then sell it after the dividend. Good morning, Joseph. Okay, let's see your message. I got spreads on the SPY 745 put, 744 put, 73 or 743, 742. I think we have a pretty large potential to pull down today. Even though we do have, potentially some bullish structure in here, I wouldn't look towards that too deeply just yet. Let's see what's going on with semis. They pulled into that. This isn't a resistance range or anything. This is just the range that we expect to close if this cup is going to form. Okay, so they pulled into that bottom of that range and rejected so far. QQQ. Not exactly the same deal here. They have closed a small cup here though, which again can lead to that pull downward to head back upward. So we'll see what's going on with QQQ in just a couple minutes. Now let me check where the call and put walls are for today. Very likely going to be these same levels. So the put wall has moved up to the 742. Which means that very likely, doesn't mean, 100%, but very likely dealers want to trade within, come on Webull, let me draw this, within this range. Which again would be below that 745, above the 742. And if you're looking at that range from, the perspective of potentially the dealer, then this does start to create that downward momentum. Because very likely the calls above this range, they'll try to sell out to burn. Now, that can change if the call wall shifts upward, which it definitely can. But so far it's not at that point. So I'm thinking about this current area as very likely they're trying to sell very high IV calls into the market, which overall is a pretty bearish move. Usually that's done to push downward. Just like if we were below the put wall, we would have that same kind of expectation that they'd be selling high V puts so that we can push upward. So currently, I think the market overall is not exactly bullish. I mean, obviously, we're having bullish price action in the pre-market and overnight and everything. But I think this movement right here is going to kind of allude to bearish pressure. So I'm going to delete this level at the 746.66, as we don't need to worry about that too much right now. Yeah, I think that looks good. I do think that they're very likely going to sell high IV calls, pull downward, and then we'll go from there. If we do see an invalidation of this cup here, that would mean we'd pull down to this 744.25. So that's kind of the first range we need to look for. And I'll go ahead and mark that. So we'll see if that cup is invalidated or not. But one thing we do have to consider when we really zoom in here is that on the 5-minute time frame, we have gone from the upper Bollinger towards this 20 MA. 20 MA can be used as an area to bounce upward, especially if this is going to be that cup and handle. So just something we do have to be concerned about a little bit. Semis have a ton of room to push downward, so we'll see what they do for the rest of the session. Kind of same with QQQ here. Has a lot of room to the downside. Now we can see the ADL on the day so far is negative. Okay, so that does show that there is currently more sellers than buyers. So I do think we have some downside ahead of us. Now remember, if we do pull down to the 744.25, that will invalidate this cup, and that will start creating additional bearish structure. Because potentially, we do have this smaller inverse cup here as well. From that inverse cup, we kind of expect bullish structure to create the handle. Now, you can say the cup, that inverse cup has been invalidated slightly, but technically it just pulled up right to that level. Did not pull above that level. So that can turn into a double top, which still kind of makes that inverse cup valid. The HIG has been pulling down pretty massively this morning. Actually didn't see how much it's pulled down. We've gone from the 79.73 all the way to the 79.66. So that's quite a bit. Volatility has been starting to climb a little bit. Did open at the 107 cents. It's currently at the 101.07, so up a whole dollar currently. Now this cup has not been invalidated yet, so until we hit that 744.25, then this could still be potentially bullish structure. Now, I've not entered anything just yet. I want to wait for either a bounce to the upside to complete this handle, or us pushing back to that 744.25 to invalidate the cup. Our ADL is still pulling down, which is kind of alluding to pushing to that 744.25 or below. HIG is at the 79.65. Volatility still pulling up, so 101.32. So far I would continue to hold those puts. When you're talking about those put spreads, I think you're going to be doing fine right now. But we do want to see the 744.25 pushed. That's really, really important. Basically hit the level 744.27. Alright, so from this point, with us closing that inverse cup there, I just want to draw this out, is that, stupid Weeble, my expectation is for this to start creating a handle to the upside, and that's when I'll enter my puts, is hopefully we can get another push above this call wall, and then from that, we'll expect to run towards that put wall. So basically taking those puts all the way to the, 742 or below. But based off of yesterday's range, we potentially can see all the way to that 740, what is it, 740.96? Now I do want to see where the daily 5 MA is at, or the 5-day moving average, whichever way you want to describe it. That's currently at the 747.13, 20 MA 744.81, 50 MA 743.74. So we have rejected the 5 MA so far today, because the lower range of that would be at the 745.11. And we are still testing the 20-day moving average and 50-day moving average. So if we reject those ranges to the downside, that'll be very, very bearish. Now, I do think we'll push all the way to the 744.25 or below. Potentially that can be a nice little entry on calls towards the upside for this handle. It's not really a position I want to take though, and every time I say that I usually regret it. But the reason why I'm saying that is because I don't think it's going to pull up very much. I think the upward momentum would be, again, slightly above that call wall and then heading back down. So there is some room, but not a whole ton of room. I would rather just try to aim some really quality puts into today, which would have been right at the open. I just did not catch it in time because I was setting everything up. Now I want to recheck the gamma and see if anything shifted. So we do have our call and put wall at the 754 or at the 745. So we're going to pull this down a little bit just so it's kind of out of range. And this does change the thesis a little bit here. And we're going to now turn this orange. Because so far, having that call and put wall at that same range is telling us that there should be the expectation of some chop here. Because they're going to be selling high V puts below, high V calls above. But the thesis will still be the same for me. If we can pull above this call wall towards that 20 mil, then for me that'll be a pretty nice entry into some puts. And I do think that the put wall will shift again. So we'll see how that works out. I'm gonna go ahead and delete the drawing now so that we can all see. Good morning. I'm sure that call did pretty well. Um, I mean, most definitely it had to have. Now I am looking for a little bit of a push here. And with that push, we actually can see, hold on, I need to change the template. We can see this head and shoulders start to form, which would also, align very well with the inverse cup that we've been talking about. Still looking for a little bit more of an upside push here before I go ahead and enter some puts on the day. Am I planning for 745 puts? Depends on the price. I'll probably be targeting the 744s. My goal usually is to buy, fairly cheaper contracts and have those turn very large, rather than buying large contracts and having them turn larger. Both works the same way, but it does allow me to pick up additional contracts that, you know, um, compared to, just buying a couple big contracts. No, I think it's okay. Just let it do its thing right now. This is building a little bit of support here, which that's something we expect with this inverse cup here. We do expect a little bit of bullishness. I don't think we entirely missed our entry. If we did, then I'm not too concerned. There's always so many different trades to take, so it's like I'd rather miss the entry and wait than rather try to force something. Now the 5-minute 20 mont is at that 745.14. So I do expect a little bit of a push here, especially with that being a call wall. You know, the whole point of that call wall is to, you know, for dealers to try to sell out a lot of high IV contracts. So I am looking for a little bit more of a push here before I enter. We are seeing semis pull down a little bit, and with that pull down, we're also seeing the volatility pull down. It was all the way at the 101.40, currently at the 152. Now the HIG is still pushing low. It's at the 79.64. So I am going to use this push here to take some call or take some puts, excuse me. And I missed my opportunity because opened my phone and accidentally pulled up semiconductors. Crap. Well, that's not ideal. Okay, well hopefully we can get another push upward so that I can enter my puts. Ideally if we can get that 745.45, that'd be really nice. But might have missed the entry. Now, one thing we do have in our favor is that volatility is pulling down a little bit, continuing to pull down. So we'll see if I can get my entry or not, but I do think I missed it. It's really annoying with Webull sometimes where you open the options list and then for me, I show quite a bit of options, but sometimes it'll pull all the way to the bottom or top of the list. So for example, right now for me when I'm opening it, it's pulling all the way to the 500 strike. Well, that's not going to do anything right now for us when we're up at the 740 range. So it's like, thanks. So I'm looking for another push upward to take puts. Again, the only thing that's kind of going in our favor right now for that expectation is that the volatility is pulling down. It's currently at the 99.91, which means that dealers are not hedging positions or, you know, exiting those insurance positions. It's at the 99.74, so that's kind of alluding to a little bit of a push here. However, our HIG is still pulling down, which is not bullish at all. So a little bit of conflicting signals between the two. And we do have semis starting to drop pretty aggressively. Has closed a little bit of an inverse cup here. From that inverse cup closing, we can start to look at this 740 range. It's actually 739 something, 739.90. So that's going to be the next target on semis, but even with that said, we should be expecting a little bit of a push upward because we have closed that cup. From closing that inverse cup, we should expect that handle. So I do think we might get an entry on these puts, which I unfortunately missed a little bit earlier. So I am going to be looking for this 745.45, basically right in here. Okay, so I have engaged a couple puts here. Now again, we can pull upward because we are seeing our volatility drop like a rock right now. It went basically from that 101.40 all the way down to that 99.19, currently sitting at the, never mind, currently at the 99.07. So we can see this push back upward. But this inverse cup here does not get invalidated until they push the 746.66. So we might see a small push up to this upper Bollinger. But regardless, I'm going to be holding these puts. I think they're very, very quality right now, especially when we are, looking at this call and put wall. Again, kind of the whole deal is to sell high AV calls above it, sell high AV puts below it. We've seen a little bit of high AV calls sold, a little bit of high AV puts sold. So we'll have to see where this heads. Now the HIG has pulled up a little bit. It's at the 79.65, but that's still, very bearish so far. It was all the way up at the 79.73. Now, one thing we do want to see for the puts is that we do want to see our volatility ticking back upward. Currently, it is at 99.11. Was lower than that. It was at the 99.04. So we'll see if we get continuation in that. And I want to look at QQQ. Inverse cup there. Can be potentially forming head and shoulders. And we already talked about that inverse cup on semiconductors. The only thing that's throwing me off today is that volatility is pulling downward. would not make sense to pull volatility downward if they are planning to sell. Now they can shift very quickly. But it's definitely something to, be semi-concerned about. So just gonna stick in this position for now until we see something shift. I want to see either volatility pulling down very hard, which it's been pulling down a little bit. We can't ignore that. And the HIG is still down very low. The ADL did pull up slightly, but it's still within the negative of the day. Volatility still pulling down, which is kind of the main thing bothering me right now. I am looking for that to start picking upward if we're really going to be seeing the selling that I'm expecting. And I want to check the gamma again just to see if anything has shifted. I am expecting the put wall to open up to the downside a little bit. Nope, still the same currently. So still at that 745. Now I know there is an AI conference tomorrow, which can lead to some bullish momentum in the market. But in terms of the data sets, there's really not a whole lot going on this week until Friday. Volatility is still pulling fairly low. I mean, it's elevated overall. Being at this 98.70 still puts us in that selling range. Technically anything above 98, you're beginning to see a lot of dealers starting to sell. But it was at that 101 something this morning. So if we are truly going to be seeing the selling side of the market, then we do expect that to start pulling upward. The HIG is still at the 79.65. It did pull up towards that 79.66, but this is still kind of alluding to, seeing selling on the day. So I think my expectation still is that volatility is going to rise back up and we see this head and shoulders slash inverse cup and handle play out. However, that can shift very quickly, so just be cautious, especially with the call and put wall being right at this same level. Currently, this tells dealers that we need to pick a side, and one of these sides we're going to basically burn, and the other side we're going to push above, because obviously you can't close between the two levels if they're right on top of each other. But I do think with the overnight momentum, with the pre-market momentum, they are going to try to chop out the calls and then pull downward. And again, I do expect the put wall to shift to the downside. Volatility hit a new low of the day, so 98.66. So as long as that continues to pull down, then we have to keep that expectation open of the potential upside. However, we're seeing semis pull down quite a bit. They did hit all the way up to the 550.80, and they're getting very close to this next support range, which if they do push down to that support range at the 539.90, then that would be pretty bearish. QQQ, very similar story going on here. We did hit the support range at the 703.35. There's the next one at the 701.64. So I will go ahead and mark that. Close enough. And if we pull down to the 744.19 again, then that should seal the deal on seeing some additional selling to the downside here. But again, there are multiple signals I want to see. I do want to see volatility pulling up, and I do want to see our put wall shift to the downside again. Ideally towards that 742, 740 range. Because that would tell us pretty much that, yes, we're going to head to that downside. Now the HIG is still holding the 79.65, which is, definitely not bullish at all. So if we can get our volatility pulling upward, then that would tell us that these puts will do well. Until then, we just have to kind of sit, be patient, and wait. HIG at the 79.64, which is overall bearish. Volatility still pulling downward though, which is kind of driving me crazy. A lot of conflicting signals on the day, which I dislike immensely. I do not like days with a ton of conflicting signals. It all goes back to market confluence. You want to see a lot of signals supporting each other. If you have signals that are not supporting each other, then potentially your thesis is incorrect. Do you want to see what's going on with semis? They hit very close to this range, but not close enough. 25 cents above that range still definitely matters. Now we are seeing the ADL pull up a little bit, which of course that's going to match the price action a little. But we have been seeing tech and semiconductors pulling up slightly, which we kind of expect. They both closed inverse cups, which can create those handles. However, on SPY, this definitely doesn't support our thesis so far. One thing that does support our thesis, though, is that we still do have this inverse cup that they have not invalidated. And they don't invalidate that until they push all the way up towards that 746.66. So but the HIG is still telling us that the expectation so far should be selling on the day. And it's continuing to pull downward. It's at the 79.63. Says my OBS disconnected. Let me know if I'm still here, everybody. Now our gamma hasn't shifted yet. It still has the call wall and put wall at that 745. And volatility is still pulling down. We're at the 98.47. Well, 98.49, pulled up 2 cents. Not a big deal though. I want to look at the 1 minute time frame here. We do have a lot of bearish structure on this 1 minute time frame. And you could see that by every time they close a cup, they invalidate it, close a cup, invalidate, close a cup, invalidate. Basically, we're just waiting for volatility to tick upward. It's still been pulling downward, which is definitely heavily conflicting with what we're expecting today. Now, if they do push up to the upper Bollinger again, I will add a few more puts, but we do have to be, extremely cautious that they can push up all the way to the 746.66. So maybe I'll try to target that range. But volatility is just dropping like a rock right now, and that's not a good signal at all. Upper Bollinger is at the 746.16, so we're basically at that level. So I will be looking for the 746.66 to be pushed. Because on semis and on QQQ, we still do have those inverse cups. And as long as QQQ semiconductors don't close those cups to the upside, then we should be getting bearish momentum later on. It's just very concerning seeing volatility pull down this hard. It's currently at the 97.63, basically the low of the day, which means that it has pulled down roughly $4. So I did set a limit order for some additional puts, just in case they do, some major candle to the upside and then pull down. However, I'm not going to be adding any additional puts until we start seeing our volatility picking back up. Now, again, it did pull down the 70 or the 97.62, currently at the 97.76. And the HIG is still pretty low. It's still at the 79.64. So Went ahead and got those puts. Guess my limit order wasn't low enough, but it's okay. Now let's see if the gamma shifted at all. Oh, still are both at that 745. So if we can't clear this cup here, then that would kind of tell me that very likely they're trying to use this range to sell high AV calls. Basically this entire range, sell super high AV calls, then pull downward. Now they are getting very close to closing this cup. Yep, I'm in puts. Good morning. Can you guys hear me? Yep, we're currently in puts, even though we're seeing potentially this cup close to the upside. However, if it does reject, then that is, very, very bearish, as we do have this inverse cup closed here. Just we have been seeing the volatility not working in our favor. But we're seeing the HIG pulling down. And we definitely are in that mean reversion territory, so no, it's very likely we do see the cup close to the upside because it's only, now only 8 cents away, so it would be kind of silly not to expect that. I mean, most certainly going to hit at this point. There's that push upward. So with that push upward, now we have to contend with this resistance range at the 747.01. I do think this is a really, really good put entry. So I'm tacking on just a few more. I don't want to overcommit. So went ahead and added additional puts up there. The 744 puts. And we are seeing our volatility start to pick back up a little bit. Not much, but a little bit. So either we're going to see the call wall shift to the upside, or we'll see the put wall shift to the downside. Volatility at the 97.82 was all the way down at the 97.62, so up a little bit, but doesn't really matter just yet. Higgs still at the 79.64. Now QQQ is getting very close to closing this, bullish cup as well. So we'll see if this resistance range pushes us downward or if we build support off of it. And I want to continue to check the gamma, see if anything shifts in there. Because as long as the call and put wall are at that 745, then the expectation should be that very likely they're going to try to burn a lot of these contracts. Kind of the same with the downside. Should try to burn a lot of those contracts. But volatility has just been pulling down. It's again at the 97.67. I think it hit the 62. But regardless, I'm still very happy with this short position because if this is a bullish cup, I didn't want to grab that line. I want to grab the top of this square. If this is a bullish cup, then we do want to be shorting the top of the cup. Because we can, expect that pull downward regardless. Makes me laugh because, like, remember this morning, for those that were watching at the time, I talked about how we were in mean reversion territory down here and that calls would potentially be really good, but I didn't want to take them, and I'd probably regret it later. Well, that definitely happened. But the same applies to what we're seeing right now, is that we're in that mean reversion territory. This is, kind of that put entry. Now, QQQ is getting very close to closing that cup, so I think the expectation should be there. Peg did hit the, or no, it is currently at the 79.63, which so far that is bearish. However, we do need to see our volatility aligning with that. Okay, so the call wall is at the 747. So we can finally shift these. So let me edit this really quick. And that means I can grab the put wall again. Okay, that makes a lot more sense now. So potentially with the call wall moving up, we can see this range traded well above it to basically sell high IV calls. However, we have been selling calls all morning. So if the market wants to burn those calls, they will have to pull it well below the call wall and very likely try to engage this put wall again. So I think that does work in our favor. Volatility starting to pick back up a little bit at the 97.98, so almost pulling towards that 98. And we're seeing oil climbing. It was at the 128 this morning, currently at the 129. So that should definitely put some pressure on equities overall. Now, my first exit on some of these puts will be at the 5 mile, not the 5 mile, excuse me, the 20 mile. So I'm gonna mark that range and I'll put a little note. So I'm going to set a market conditional order to sell at that range for some of the contracts. So that'd be what, the 745.56. We'll put ours at the 745.59. just to secure a little bit of profit on the day. My puts are almost back to green, so I'm happy with that. I feel like I really want to target that 744.79 instead. We'll just keep our current MCO and then we'll work with whatever we get after that. Volatility's at the 97.99, so we do want to be seeing that pull upward quite a bit. Right as I say that, it's at the 98.07, but we still want to be seeing that pull up a lot higher than that. No worries, Jared. Have a good day. I'm in the 744 puts. Sorry, if you guys can't hear me, I'm gonna have to adjust the mic settings when I get a chance. So I do have that first put exit at the 745.59. I'm also targeting a put exit at this 744.87. So I'm gonna make a little note there as well. So that's kind of what I'm looking at currently. Now QQQ is still not close that cup. I think the expectation should definitely be there. That will pull up and close that cup. And semis so far have not been trying to close this cup to the upside, which overall that is bearish. But that can very quickly change, as always. Now I'm not going to move my conditional orders up currently. I just want to see how this plays out. The ADL is almost positive on the day. Not yet, but it's getting very close. The HIG is at 79.63 still. Now, if I remember correctly, the daily 5-day moving average was at that 747. So if we're really going to be testing that range, potentially we could be pulling all the way to the 749. QQQ looks like it's getting ready to close that cup. Oh, it did. Okay, so it did hit the 707.35. So cup has closed, which means we should be expecting a handle on this. So we should be expecting a push downward. Semiconductors getting very close to closing this cup. Still not there just yet, but you know, $2 away isn't that much for semiconductors at all. Volatility was up at the 98 something. It was like at that 98.11, something like that. Currently at the 97.71. So that has pulled downward slightly again. But that coincides a lot with, you know, us going from, what was this, the 745.78 back up to the 747. No, again, I'm not really worried about this position right now. I do have full expectation that they will pull down towards this put wall. Just more so annoying, if anything. Not really seeing anything shift just yet. HIG is still at the 79.64. Volatility at the 97.74. Now again, with this call wall being at that 747, the full expectation should be that the dealers are trying to sell really high V calls currently. Yeah, Tomo, we still are holding puts. And the primary reason why I'm not worried about this upside buying right now is that, again, our call wall is at this 747, which means that from the dealer standpoint, and this is something we've seen, session after session, they usually try to pull to that call wall, pull above it slightly to sell really high V contracts, and then shift below that. So they've been selling calls pretty much the entire morning so far. Now it doesn't mean they can't continue. They, absolutely can. But the expectation should be that dealers don't want to exercise all these calls. Very likely going to try to shake out a lot of those positions, get below the put wall very slightly, which, would print our puts very nicely. Volatility has pulled up slightly, so it's at the 97.97. The put wall has shifted, or no, it's still at the 745, excuse me. Thought it shifted, but I was just looking at it incorrectly. Call wall has moved up though. Okay, so it has moved up to the 748. Which means that we can see a push, going above that range. Which is not good for our puts. Okay. Something I did not want to see. But we have seen the call wall move upward 3 times today. Which also can be telling us that, the dealers don't have to continue pushing above that range each time it moves. They definitely can, but they don't have to. So I'm just gonna mute just for a couple of minutes so I can drink my coffee and try to eat my breakfast really quick. Probably won't have time, but I'll be mute just a minute, but I'll still be here. Alright, a couple updates while I was mute. So, volatility has pulled up a little bit. It's back above that 98, and we have seen the call wall shift back downward. Okay, so it did pull up to the 748, currently back down to the 747, which is really good for us. Up at that 748, that shifted our thesis a lot. Made things a little concerning, but at the 747, this is kind of exactly what we're expecting. I need to say bye to my daughter really quick, so I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back. So, volatility is still picking up here. So, hopefully we can finally get our selling. The HIG is still pulling downward, so it's at the 79.62. Volatility at the 98.34. We are expecting volatility to pick up, quite a bit if we're really going to be seeing major selling today. Sorry for all the lines on the screen. It's kind of driving me crazy here. But they're important, so can't really do much about that. However, the thesis is still the same. We expected dealers to sell calls above the call wall. That call wall did shift. It originally opened the day at the 745, while the put wall was at the 742. Those levels both basically shifted upward, which it happens. We can't change that. But that means that they have been selling a lot of calls at that call wall already. They've been, again, basically for the majority of the morning, selling a lot of high V calls. Because even though the put wall did move upward, all the calls in this range originally were still above that original put wall, or call wall. So basically all of these calls have been high V calls, which gives dealers a lot of incentive to, once again, pull downward, pull below the put wall, get a lot of people shaken out of those calls, so that way they don't have to exercise a ton of positions. So as long as we continue to see volatility pulling upward, seeing the HIG holding its level or pulling downward, not seeing the call or put wall shift on us any, then our expectation should be good here. Now the call wall, once again, right as I say that, has shifted back upward to the 748, but I do think that's going to change pretty soon here again, unless we actually see major buying to the upside. But with the increase in volatility, with the HIG continuing to pull downward, I don't think that's super likely just yet. I think very likely we will see our downside push. Now, even with all this upside pressure, my puts are actually not even down that much right now. They've been gaining a ton of IV. So that's interesting to see. Volatility continuing to push upward, so at the 98.53. The only concern that I have really is that the call wall did shift upward. And again, that this can be a cup and handle trying to form. But I do think that they tried to form that handle there. And so far, we're seeing a rejection um, with us pulling down basically at 745.80 range. We got very close to that. We pulled down to 745.83, so 3 cents off. That should invalidate the handle. Not the entire cup yet, um, which can lead to creating an additional handle or a larger handle. And volatility has pulled down a little bit, so it's at the 98.19. It was all the way at the 98.53. And from the 5-minute standpoint, we did pull from the upper Bollinger to the 20 MA. So even if I may not want it to, technically we can get that bounce to the upside. I want to look at the 1-minute time frame for a moment here though. Can close a small cup here at the 746.91. Just did that. So on the 1-minute time frame, it's telling us very likely we push back into the upper Bollinger, which the upper Bollinger on the 1-minute time frame is at the 747.16. So we should clear that 747.26 if we're going to be pushing back upward. Yeah, that's what we're looking at, is that potentially this could be a bounce off that 20 mo. And we do see semis back at the 550. Okay, so the expectation here should really be that they're going to push this 550.80, basically that 551 range, and then start to pull downward from there. So that might be trying to align with what we're seeing on SPY. I'll look at QQQ on the 15-minute time frame here. QQQ is really far from the next resistance, but that doesn't mean they don't try to push for it. That would mean a whole additional $5 upside, which isn't entirely out of the question, but I do think it's a little unreasonable for today. Now, can semiconductors push up towards that 560 today? Absolutely. It's actually at that 558, which makes that even less of a push needed. And the next range for the SPY would be at that 748.73, closing that very large cup. Again, this is on the 15-minute time frame. And that would correlate quite heavily with where the call wall shifted upward towards where the max pain's at. So potentially we could be pushing upward quite a bit here, even though the market is already very green. Volatility still at the 97, 93. Yeah, I took a little bit of profit, but not a whole ton. I still have some puts going. Which those puts are definitely getting roasted a little bit right now. We can delete that because we have pushed above it. Now, again, this isn't a position where I'm going to chase calls toward the upside, even though I think the potential to push up towards that 748, 749 is definitely there. Especially with seeing volatility pull back down again. Once again, back down at the 97.52. So a pretty large shift to the downside in our volatility. The HIG is still holding pretty low though, at the 79.64. And we do see this cup closed on semis, which this can help our bearish thesis because the expectation should be for semis to pull all the way from the upper Bollinger slash the top of this cup down towards the 20 MA. So that would definitely pull on the SPY quite a bit. So in hindsight, when I say these positions where I mention that I'm not going to take them even though I think they're really good, I just need to take them from this point because this is probably like the 100th time that I've done that. But we did talk about calls at the low of the day. And those would have, absolutely blasted off. Your puts are medium well. Yeah, mine are looking a little well done right now, but not entirely. So at this point, I'm wanting to see semiconductors pull down. I'm wanting to see QQQ pull down because both of those have formed their cups, and they're pretty large cups too, which means that we should be expecting somewhat large handles. Doesn't mean that's always going to be the case, especially if they're trying to just fill fair value gaps or something to the upside, which I don't really think they're trying to do right now, but we can't discount that potential right now. Now again, with this call wall being at the 748, um, kind of the expectation I would assume out of dealers would be to push towards that level or above, which of course doesn't fit our thesis of the puts currently. The ADL is almost at the positive, not quite yet, but it's getting very, very close. Volatility at the 97.39, so I think that's the low of the day so far. Yep, that is. The call wall has shifted back down to the 747, which that definitely does help our thesis. It entirely changes the outlook of what we're expecting here, because rather than expecting basically pushing above that 748 into, potentially that 749, that shifts us to we're already at that level. Okay, we're already selling above the dealer level, which means that dealers should, doesn't mean they will, we've seen days where they haven't, but they should try to pull below the gamma wall, okay? Which, absolutely supports our thesis of our puts currently. Even if they're getting cooked pretty hard right now. And we are starting to see semis pulling down a little bit. So if we can get continuation within that, if we can get our volatility pulling back up and actually pulling up, not just hitting that 98 range and then pulling back down again, then that will kind of support what we're seeing with the call wall. So I'm not worried about the positions just yet. It did change a little bit when we did see that call wall pull up towards the 748. Because that meant that potentially we could be seeing like that whole dollar and a half upside. But currently with the call wall at the 747, this is telling us exactly that we're already getting those super high IV calls sold into the market. So at this point, I'm just waiting for semis to sell, waiting for volatility to pull back upward. We did hit that mean reversion territory once again. And I did add 2 more puts there. So I will be looking for an exit for some of these puts at the 746.28, probably slightly above that. Let's do the 746.39. And after that exit, then I will be looking for basically under this put wall range. Volatility at a new low of the day, 97.28. Still kicking myself over not taking those calls earlier, but it is what it is. Semis are still at the 552. And let me go ahead and see if the gamma has shifted at all. And the call wall has jumped back up to that 748, which is not what we want. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. You can definitely take a call as a hedge to the puts here. For me, I'm gonna be stubborn though. Might pay for it later, we'll see. Volatility is at the 97.09, so a new low of the day. But with that shift in the call wall from the 747 to the 748, you know, I kind of fully expect this price action right now. In fact, we should be expecting push above the range. Which is a bit unfortunate for our puts right now. Semis are at the 553. And I want to take a look at those really quick. So they do have the cup and handle. At least on the 1 minute time frame. QQQ, same structure, built the cup, have the handle breakout. So they did not give the handle a whole ton of downside. Kind of same thing with SPY here. Starting to see semis pull down a little bit. Not a whole ton yet, but they were at the 553 and currently at the 551. I'm gonna go grab some coffee really quick, so I'll be right back in like 5 minutes. Time will it be? 11, let's say 11:38. If my message will show, there we go. Alright, I'm gonna take a really quick coffee break. I need to brew some coffee really quick, so I will be right back and we'll see where everything is when I'm back. So, one moment. I'm back, everybody. Yes, I'm still holding my puts. So we see volatility at the 96, 93, which again, it was at the 101.20-ish, if I remember correctly. So basically $5 to the downside so far. Now, when we get to the 20 mod this time, I will be hedging some calls, just in case we do have that massive push up to the 749. Semis are at the 550, techs at the 708. So if we can see those start to lose their level a little bit, then we should be seeing some of this downside that we're expecting. But we do need to be seeing volatility pick up a lot more. Again, it's at the 96.90. Gamma has shifted on us a lot today, though. I'm still expecting us to push down towards that put wall, which is at the 745. It would just make a lot of sense from the dealer standpoint. Let me go ahead and get an arrow. Now that we are, at this 748 range and we are starting to sell high V calls, yes, we can still push above that, still sell some more calls in that range. But again, my expectations at this point is that they've been selling calls all morning. We are still, massively in the green. We can push below the put wall here and still have a green market. Okay. Which overall would be a win for the bulls. But it would allow the dealers to not have to exercise all those calls. So I am kind of expecting that, even though it might seem out of reach right now. I wouldn't really be looking lower than that on the day though. There's quite a lot of buying within the equities and calls right now. And even within the ADL, we've seen that it was very negative this morning, and now it's not fully positive. Shows that it's positive in terms of the actual looking at it, but in terms of the money amount, we're still not positive on the day. So we'll have to see. Um, but we have seen days where, dealers have went ahead and exercised all the calls. One thing we do know about calls compared to puts, it is a lot easier for them to exercise call positions because each time they sell a call during this entire run upward, they're usually buying shares to compensate. Um, so they're not exactly losing money when it comes to exercising all those calls. It would just make them a lot more money to be able to sell out the call premium, um, pull down, shake out the majority of those calls, buy them back, close those positions, and, go from there. So that's what I'm looking for, but it doesn't mean that it's going to occur. Now let me see if the gamma is updated at all. I don't really expect the put side to shift any. Ooh, that call wall has moved up towards 750. That is very bad. Don't expect it to be up there for too long. Unless we actually start, pushing up all the way to that range. But that could absolutely kill our puts. So I dislike that a lot. And the put wall has shifted to the 747, which again, I dislike that a lot. I do think those gamma ranges will shift. But basically that's telling us that all these calls and puts under this range are completely okay. And that they would be trying to target basically that max pain range, which is not ideal. Yeah, I don't like that one bit. That really, really shifts the overall thesis currently. So we're gonna look for a put exit underneath this put wall. Again, it's gonna coincide a lot with what we're seeing from the 20 mile here. But this is not ideal at all. And I'm really kicking myself over not taking those calls earlier. No, I don't. I skipped the original entry right here. And the main reason why I did is because the call and put wall was both at the 745. So I just had the assumption that they would try to fill out this bearish structure because we did have a very nice handle for our very nice inverse cup forming and a head and shoulders forming here. And then it kind of just blasted off. The one thing that has been very truthful to the day, though, is that volatility has been pulling down pretty much the entirety of the session. The HIG has not been matching our bullish momentum here at all. It's still at the 79.64, so that's not shifting to the upside like I would really expect it to. And then we did have the put wall shift from the 745, or excuse me, I think it was at the 742 at one point today. Um, then it shifted to the 745. But basically that call wall's gone up a whole $5 today, which is a little hard to contend with when you're trying to position around where you're expecting the dealers to close out positions or whatnot. Now I do know after today's stream I'm going to be looking for some sort of long-term position that's fairly cheap that we can take again, because I know I've been setting those up over the last couple weeks that, or last couple months, and those have been doing fairly well. Some of them not so much, but the majority of them do hit their strike. So I do want to get some of those set up. I haven't been able to set those up for the last 2 weeks. Don't really have time to set that up on the stream right now though, because there's just too much to watch right now. But if we can get our put exit, then that would be a little different. However, I'm not really expecting that so much right now. Um, with that call wall being at the 750. Call wall has shifted again. This is really shifting a lot. I don't like this. This is shifting way too much. But it has pulled back downward. Put wall is at the 747. Call wall at that 748. So no longer at the 750. So having this call wall at the 748 is really good, as long as it continues to remain there. Because then our thesis changes a lot compared to expecting them to push all the way to the 750 range. Now it's more so we're already in that range of where they're trying to sell really high V contracts. They haven't been able to sell a lot of puts yet. It's been basically all calls this entire day. And within the gamma, we see that as well. There hasn't been a whole lot of puts written today so far. But with having the market heavily lean on one side, that can create conditions where we can see the other side push, the opposite direction. So for now, still going to be holding my puts. I'm going to look at QQQ semis. Bit of a head and shoulders there on the 1 minute time frame. Not so much on QQQ. I can't stop yawning. So I'm sticking with the current thesis. What do I think about a 750 call 0 DTE? I mean, I don't dislike it. I just don't like buying it at this range. I would definitely try to aim for either the middle Bollinger or the lower Bollinger. It's usually when you want to buy the calls. And if the call wall stays at the 748, then, I think there's a high likelihood that pulling above that range can get sold off. If we actually start seeing some downside today, though, I do think the put wall will shift to the downside further. We just haven't seen that yet. Just waiting for either semis to start selling off, QQQ to start selling off, or volatility to pick up. So far we're not really seeing any of that just yet. Now, volatility was at the 96.72, currently at the 96.99. So if we can continue to see that pulling upward, that would be ideal for us. I really do want to target this 745 range for the put exit. Because even though the put wall might be at that 747 currently, there's just not a lot of people writing puts right now. Once we do start seeing some selling and some of these calls start getting shaken out, we will start seeing a lot more people entering the puts, and I do think the put wall will shift back towards that 745, potentially even lower. But that's if we actually get our selling though. We're still, quite a ways from that range. Do have semis working on some bearish structure on the 1 minute time frame at least. 5 minute time frame as well, but this coincides well with the cup and potentially forming of the handle. A little bit of the same on QQQ, but not so much. Still bearish structure though. SPY really not there yet. I'm in the 744 puts and the 745 puts. And I'll go ahead and check the gamma again. Still at that 748, so that's good. So current thesis still stands. Basically, just let dealers sell out high V calls, and we should get a pull down. Which currently the expectation would be to pull down below that 747. Sell some puts at that range. And then if they're going to head back up, then they can head back up. But I do expect them to pull down, you know, a little bit more than that today. Yeah, you're very welcome. I'm holding a 747 put, can't find exit. I think that's going to be okay. So I know the price is working against us currently, but you have to remember, you have to trade against the dealers, not against anybody else. It's the dealers we care about. Now, if this call wall is going to stay at this 748, that means that the dealers, I want to sell high IV calls at that point. Okay. Do they want to exercise those high IV calls? They can. That absolutely can happen. But the overall thesis would be that no, they don't want to exercise those calls. They ideally want to sell high IV calls and then burn them, which means that everything selling above that range should get pulled down. Okay. Now again, we've been selling calls the entirety of the day. I mean, almost the entire session so far. The only time we were selling puts was basically right at the open. When we went from that 746 down to the 744. But from that entirety, the entirety of that time, there was a little selling in here, but not really anything. That didn't last very long at all. We've been selling very high IV calls. So does the dealers want to exercise all those calls? I personally don't think so. Doesn't mean that they won't. We've seen sessions that they've done that, but I don't think that they're aiming to do that. So I do think you will get an exit. May not be the exit that we originally wanted, but I do think that we will get a put exit today. So today is one of those days where it's really, I don't want to say ideal, but it's really ideal to hold on to those puts and really just hold them tight. Does that mean we won't get burned on them? No, I can't guarantee that at all. This is the market. The market doesn't really care what our thesis is or anything else. But just seeing from the dealer aspect and the dealer point of view, dealers usually don't want to be closing the day above the call wall. They usually don't want to be closing the day below the put wall. Usually they want to find a balance in between those two levels. So with us heavily selling calls the majority of the day so far, this is really trying, at least in my opinion, this is telling me that I am, expecting some downside. Shaking some of these calls out and pulling this put wall down slightly. Doesn't mean that'll occur though. Yesterday's trading session was pretty much almost the entirety of the trading session just selling puts into the market. So today can just be filling up that range of what we sold off yesterday. I wouldn't take them for Friday. The SQQ puts that are not the puts, SQQQ calls that I've actually been looking for are the 50 strike for September. I actually think those could be super good. Now, if we're going to have a bullish week, you absolutely can take puts on SQQQ, but I think at this point, it's not really the most opportune time, especially when we've been pushing up the entirety of the day. This is kind of the type of position where I'd actually be more inclined to take an SQQQ call, because remember this is an inverse ETF, so the calls are actually puts, the puts are actually calls. But I do really like the 50 strike call for September. Very likely going to fill some of those out pretty soon here. And I think they're about 250 per, so not the worst. And it's a position that's going to last you, you know, basically 2 months. I've had my mic muted for I don't know how long. I do apologize. I've been sitting here talking. Um, how long have I been muted? I feel like an idiot when that happens. Anyway, um, kind of going over everything that I just ranted on about. I'm taking SQQQ calls for September. You can take an SQQQ put for this week, but that's basically buying a call at the top of the day because remember SQQQ is an inverse ETF. So calls in this are basically tech puts. Puts in this are tech calls. So getting an SQQQ put is basically saying that you're buying a call towards the top of the day, which doesn't mean we're at the top, you know. Um, Again, we can absolutely push upward much further. But overall, I'm more inclined to taking a long-term put, especially going through August and September. Usually extremely bearish months, especially with midterms coming up. So I did take the SQQQ 50 straight calls for September 18th. Dang it. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I have no clue how long I was muted for. Um, I was explaining a ton of stuff too. That sucks. But anyway, the expectation out of today at least is that yes, we're pushing upward, but the call wall has not shifted. It's not shifting above that 750 at this point. So this is kind of exactly what we're expecting in here to see them selling high V calls. We also have a really crucial resistance range at that 748.73. So pushing up to that, you know, seeing how we're only basically 30 cents away, would not be unreasonable. Um, but the call wall is still at the 748, which means that from the dealer perspective, and again, we are trading against the dealers, that means they want to sell high IV calls. Now, they've been basically selling calls the entire morning. So that does kind of give me conviction that they will try to pull down at least sometime today to knock a lot of those positions out. Doesn't mean they will do that though. We've seen days where they've just continued to buy up through the call wall and close above the call wall, especially based off of yesterday's trading session where we did go from that 748.73 all the way down to that 741. This could just be basically filling the fair value gap from that range, closing the cup. But even then, with the cup closing, we do expect bearish structure at the top and a large handle downward. So it all kind of ties into that. So I do think that yes, we're pushing upward. Yes, we're probably going to push upward a little further. But I don't think the puts are totally shot just yet. Yeah, they're on the Discord. So I need to change the channel name, but it's within the how to use the Gex Index or whatever it's called. You can basically just look in the search bar on the Discord and type in GEX in all caps, and you should be able to find the channel. So I do kind of expect this push up to the 748.73, even though I am in puts and expecting downside. Um, we're just very, very close to that resistance range. And in reality, just thinking about this from a dealer perspective again, is that with selling all these calls this morning, with there being very low interest in puts, which absolutely, in hindsight, I could see why. Um, when we do start selling, which I fully kind of expect at this point, if we do start selling, then the put IV is going to basically skyrocket, and it won't take them very long to clear almost the entirety of this range. Because again, they can pull down to the low of the day, and as long as they close that cup, which they're going to any second now, this would still be a bullish structure, okay? This would still be that larger cup forming and then potentially the handle, okay? So can we see a really nice exit on our puts? I think so. I think it's not something we can completely toss out the window at this point. So I will be holding my puts. Um, if nothing shifts in the next hour and a half, then I will reconsider my thesis. But so far, I think that's very reasonable. So does everybody kind of have the idea of what we should be expecting at this point on the day? is that we should be expecting you know, obviously pushing to that range, which we're 6 cents off. We're going to push it, um, potentially push above that. But once we do, we are closing a very large cup. We should expect bearish structure at the top of that cup, whether they push us to the 753, whether they start to reject basically right at that range. Little too soon to determine just yet. But that should be the expectation. Large cup filled, and they did fill that cup. We did hit the 748.75. We needed to hit the 748.73. So that range has been hit. So now we're at this point, we're just looking for bearish structure. Max pain is at the 749, which means that we should get a pretty nice rejection off that level. We are above the call wall currently, which means that dealers are selling super high V calls. Dealers usually don't want to exercise those calls, so we should expect a pull downward. Once we start pulling downward, the put wall should shift a little bit. If it doesn't, then it's not the end of the world. But we should see the put wall shift a little bit. And from that put wall shifting, we should see some nice downside. Again, we could see potentially the low of the day and still be, bullish overall. But with that said, I do need to end the stream pretty soon here because I do need to take care of some things for my daughter. Excuse me, I can't talk. But does anybody have any questions about what we're seeing here, what we should be potentially expecting to see? Any symbols you want to go over very quickly, anything like that? Because now would be most certainly the time to do so. And again, for my puts, I am going to be holding them basically until, you know, I know the time differential is a little bit shifted because I'm on the West Coast, but towards that 1 p.m. Time frame for the East Coast. For me, that'll be 11 a.m. If nothing shifts by that point, that would give us basically, the 2 hours left within the market. And with 2 hours left in the market, our puts are still going to have a little bit of weight to them because the theta is not going to completely eat those contracts within the next hour and a half. And if we don't start seeing our move in the next hour and a half, then maybe we should adjust our thesis a little bit. But if there's any questions or over anything, I'll be happy to go over them. I believe the yen has hit a new high today. Well, a new low. This is the USD to yen conversion rate. So basically this is an inverse chart. When the yen is very high and elevated, this means that, or when the USD JPY is elevated, the yen is absolutely dumping into the ground. Which overall, this is bullish for the market. Okay, when the yen is pushing low, that gives US equity traders and dealers and everybody more ability to basically take the dollar, put it into the yen, and take, a ton of different leverage positions within the yen. But I am looking for bearish structure at this point, now that we have hit the top of that cup. Yes, we can push above that range slightly, so if we push above the 749, even hitting the 750 range, don't be surprised. I think that's very within the expectations of what we're seeing right now, even if it may not be what we want to see. So I'm going to delete that resistance range because no longer necessary. And I will have to mark out some of these other resistances for tomorrow's stream. But the next resistance is very close to that 750.53. We have not seen the handle on this cup yet, so let me go ahead and draw this out. And I want to just turn off the Bollinger so that it's super, super, super clear. So that's the cup we just completed. Okay, and this is over a 2-day period. With that cup being completed, we should be anticipating bearish structure at the top. So we basically haven't even started with the handle yet. Maybe we're starting formation now. Maybe not. Maybe we need to push up a little bit further prior to that. But the expectation really should be to form that handle to the upside. Now, whether that handle is going to be all the way down, towards that 744 range, I have no clue. It might be just some tiny little handle before heading upward. Okay, we don't know yet. But we do know that the handle hasn't been created yet. So that is working in our favor. Alright, everybody, I'm going to stream tomorrow because, again, I didn't stream on Monday. So I'm going to be making that up tomorrow morning. And I will be putting out a recap video tonight. I know not a lot of people have been watching those. A lot of people don't watch my videos. It's kind of sad, but it is what it is. But for those that do, hopefully they help. I try to go over the call walls and the put walls and all the individual details of the day. But yeah, I'll see hopefully all of you tomorrow, and hopefully we will have a better trading session. The calls at this range that I said would be really good that I didn't take, I really kicked myself in the butt over because those would have been very, very, very good today. So, oh well, tomorrow will come. So, take care, everybody. Have a great day, and hopefully I'll see you all tomorrow morning. Take care.